Welcome to the podcast, Wait, What Do You Do Again? Where we talk to everyday people doing amazing things. I'm your host, Megan DeFord. Let's go. Today we are talking to Alisa Sieber-Johnson, CEO and co-founder of Dogs on Deployment, which connects service members with volunteers who board their pets while they're on deployment. Enjoy. Alisa, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Excellent. I am so excited to talk to you today and talk to you about your work with Dogs on Deployment. Can you talk about what this nonprofit is and what it does?
Yes. So, quick story to get into that. In 2011, I was 22 years old and I had to go to the basic school for Marine Corps training. I had just commissioned as a new lieutenant in the Marine Corps. I was married to a Navy lieutenant, and at the same time, he was scheduled to deploy while I was supposed to go to live in the barracks for 6 months. And we found ourselves with no one available to care for our dog, JD. He was extremely high energy and a very naughty dog. And we were really lucky. We found a distant relative that was willing to watch JD during our service commitments. But it was that situation that led us to found the organization Dogs on Deployment to serve people just like me. Service members that are going on deployment or have training, or perhaps they're veterans that need inpatient treatment. We provide free foster care for their pets while they have to have their service commitments.
I was really blown away when I heard about this organization because it's something I never thought about before.
Right.
Prior to you needing to find a home for JD, was this something that you were familiar with either other military members, or was this is a situation that opened up your eyes to this, problem?
Interesting question. And I love the way that you put that, because I didn't really realize I was starting Dogs in Deployment as it was occurring, right? And before I had this military commitment come up, I was looking to adopt a second dog. And I had gotten 3 adoption applications denied from the agencies because I cited my employment as being the military as well as my spouse. And all of their, they were very blunt, saying we will not adopt to a dual military family because the fear of relinquishment is so high. So ultimately, what we ended up doing by creating this program, and it works like a match.com or a rover.com, and the way that a service member comes to our website, they create a profile and they have to go through a thorough approval process. So we do have a very strict eligibility requirements, and we work with each person one-on-one. But once they are approved, if they're eligible, then they have access to our network of borders across the country. And it's in that network that ultimately we are preventing that service member from having to ever consider relinquishing their pet. And so, because I had come from an animal background, I had fostered before, I had heard of this problem, but I never in a million years would have expected myself and my husband to have been in that situation. And when we found ourselves in it, there was nothing else to do but create a solution for it.
That's incredible. Did you grow up with animals?
Yes, absolutely. I had birds growing up. I had cats. I had dogs. I had a horse when I was younger. I was in the farm or rescuing animals or doing whatever I could to be around animals. I worked at Petco in college and volunteered at Project Wildlife for a little bit. So yes, volunteerism in the animal community is a part of who I am at my core.
And how did you get to the military? Was this something that you always dreamed about doing, or what was your path there?
That is a very loaded question. Something that I'm heavily exploring in my lifelong passion, which is to write a book.
Oh, wonderful.
I would say, in a nutshell, the reason for me joining the Marine Corps was because I needed a structure. I needed a stability. I joined in 2006. Financial crisis was at a peak. I didn't have a way to pay for college. I didn't come from great means. And If I have to be completely honest, I didn't really feel like I had a lot of options because I had a lot of traumatic events that happened to me early on in life. And so when I found the Marine Corps, it spoke to me with their core values of honor, courage, commitment. And as somebody that just intrinsically has that dedication within my core of who I am, uh, those appealed to me greatly. And I was very fortunate. While I wasn't the best student, I was good enough to get a ROTC scholarship, and I was able to get into University of San Diego. I got my engineering degree there through the ROTC unit, and eventually I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, finding myself needing placement for my dog, JD.
It's definitely a pathway for so many people. And now it's led you to this, which is incredible. So,
Yes.
how do service members find you?
Yes, so Dogs and Deployment is completely online.
Mhm.
We have a website you go to, it's dogsondeployment.org. There's an application process for both the service member and also our volunteers. So everything that our organization does occurs on our website, dogsondeployment.org.
Mhm. And so actually let me back up a little bit. So you had JD
Mhm.
and needed to find a home for JD. So
Yes,
that happened. And
yes.
then how did this expand? Like how do you even set this up? Because I
I'm
loved
gonna
how
give all credit to Queen Latifah.
I love it.
If I have to be completely honest, we had honestly, like I was in flight school during the time of doing this organization, and I had a manual, archaic website that had like an email contact us form, and I was literally manually putting people together and making these connections. And that was a huge conflict for me as well, being in the service as well as being in flight school. And it made my career from the get-go way more challenging than I ever anticipated it to be, because from the Marine Corps perspective, they looked at me as though I was having a conflict of interest with my time. But I looked at it as, well, this is one, I'm serving the military community, and two, I'm doing this in my free time, and you don't get to dictate what I do in my free time. But there are stipulations within the military about active duty troops endorsing nonprofits and endorsing causes.
Oh.
So I was in this constant state of, you know, kind of walking a fine line between being a marketing piece for the Marine Corps and also being this kind of liability. But in 2013, as I was starting to put these people together, I started to get a trickle in of donations. I was able to hire some programmers to develop our very first website, and we started to pick up speed. And Queen Latifah invited us to do a live reunion on her show with a Army soldier that had been deployed for 1 year and her dog Emma. And we did this amazing reunion. The thing went viral. My website crashed. And that's really when things started steamrolling from
Yeah.
there. And I mean, and that goes to show like the power of entertainment industry, and something that we're working on right now, trying to do with Dogs on Deployment, is get back into that space.
Yeah. And how did Queen Latifah hear about you?
I have no idea. If we could just get her back on the phone and ask her, I'd love that.
That
Really,
is,
it's likely social media. Everything is about what you see online. And for us, putting out our reunion videos and our heartwarming stories of pets not going into a shelter. Or recently, for example, we had a cane Curacao dog named Blue Moon, whose owner didn't know about us. And he got short notice deployment, and he turned his dog into the shelter. He's upset. He is crying. He is like not in his right state of mind doing this, but he doesn't have any options. So he thinks. And luckily, the shelter knew about our organization, immediately contacted us. We got a volunteer in there, and we were able to put Blue Moon in a border for, I believe, 6 months, and they were recently reunited. So I mean, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, like, I don't know. I don't know what could give you goosebumps then. I can't
And
help.
I can't imagine, I have two kids and I have two cats, and I can't imagine it's hard enough, to, I know this is something you signed up for, but it's hard enough to have to go, right?
Yeah,
And I can't imagine, and you're leaving your friends, you're leaving your family, but then leaving your pets,
right.
it's so hard, and they don't understand what's going on. So I'm so glad that the shelter knew about you and was able to connect you. How do you vet your volunteers who take in the pets, and what are those responsibilities that they have?
Great question. We do not vet our volunteers. Our organization looks huge online. I know that. We are not. It is myself. It is another military spouse who is our executive director in San Diego with me, and another military spouse on the East Coast who does our marketing and communications. That's it. Very small team. And so we don't have the capacity to go through and vet all of our borders while we do vet all of our military members. So there's where our efforts go. So instead, we place the onus of that vetting process on the pet owner by providing them resources with saying, hey, you need to do a meet and greet, you need to ask for references, you need to do a trial run with these, the family that you're talking to, you might want to ask for a background check,
Mhm.
and go through that process on their own. And then Dogs in Employment remains supportive to them in that process by either providing resources, or if there is an issue, making sure that we give our attention to it. But
That's great.
while a
Yeah.
boarder is responsible for bringing in a pet, it is very important to know that the pet owner is expected to always remain financially responsible for their pet. So
Mhm.
should food be needed, which of course it would be, or veterinary care or toys or anything like that, it should not come out of the boarder's pocket.
Do the boarders having a pet already, like, is that typically helpful or not? Or I guess it might just be case by case depending on
It's
the
definitely
animal.
case by case, but we look for boarders that both have pets and that don't have pets, because we do have several military families that will apply with non-dog friendly dogs.
Mm.
So it's not a super common thing, but we
Sure.
definitely do have those cases. And so it is important for us to have people that don't have companion animals already within their homes. But I would say majority of our folks do already have pets, in which case that's why we always suggest doing a meet and greet at a neutral place like a dog park, or doing a trial run for a period of time. And I should also note that these principles apply to cats too. Well, you
Ah,
wouldn't take your cat to a dog park, obviously, doing a trial run for cats, because while we're Dogs on Employment, we do support all other animals.
nice. And can you share maybe one of the more heartwarming stories that you have about um, either a dog or cat that was placed and their family and boarders?
Oh my gosh.
I bet you have a lot.
I know it's, you know, this organization now has been around for 13 years, and we've helped over 3,000 pets.
Wow.
And each of those pets has associated with it a individual human being that is the pet owner that either I or my executive director, Courtney, or one of our previous volunteers personally talked to and approved. And then for each one of those pets, there's also an entire boarding family on the other end of that. But the one that comes closest to me is our current mascot. So each year, Dogs on Deployment does a American Hero Pet of the Year, where we tell military members, we know you have amazing stories to share with us about why your pet ownership and their companionship is so important to you in regards to your military service. One of the biggest negative comments that Dogs on Deployment receives is, well, you're in the military. Why'd you get a dog in the first place if you're going to deploy? And okay, valid point. However, what is being missed there is the amount of mental health struggles, stress, anxiety induced workplace environments that these service members are operating in. And to come home to nothing exasperates that. To come home to a happy dog, like that, there is a level of morale boosting there that can't be achieved anywhere else. So we really use this contest as a way to bridge the gap between our civilian and our military populations to showcase, hey, we all love our animals, but look at why the service members love their animals, because it really does go to a depth that most civilians wouldn't even understand had they not thought about it. So with this contest, we found last year Daisy, and she is this adorable little Brittany Spaniel dog that when she won, her pet owner's name is Ren Hester. She's an ensign in the Navy, and she's currently in Corpus Christi, Texas, in flight school. And when I got her application in, I had this like pit in my stomach because it was me 10 years ago, right? I was at Corpus Christi, Texas, flying the orange airplane. Mine was older. She got the new plane, which is nice. I had my black and white dog that was cute and had like the fluffs. I always say the curls behind the ears because I had an Australian Shepherd.
Uh-huh.
And it's just, I saw my story being lived again. And Ren needed to go to a det, which is a detachment. And she had to leave her dog, Daisy, and her other dog, Bruce, with a DoD border while she did this detachment. And I had done that same detachment, and I had to take my dog, JD, in Jersey at the time to go live with my husband in California. And so when you think of a decade has gone by and still the need exists. Like our organization's mission is like indefinite because there's always going to be the call to duty that's going to conflict with what you have going on in your personal life. And Dogs in Employment is the only organization that provides a national free to use pet boarding network. And while we serve service members, veterans, and first responders, fire and police as well, I have goals of expanding my services to domestic violence victims in the future. And I would love, love, love to see my network have the ability to share our resources with other animal shelters so that when a shelter needs to get a foster home, they could come to Dogs in Employment's border network as well. So the long-term game on this, now that I'm out of active duty service, so I've always had these ideas, but it wasn't really until recently that I was able to truly step into my role as the CEO of this organization. My long-term goal is to create not just something that prevents the unnecessary pet relinquishment of military and veterans, but just prevents the unnecessary pet relinquishment, period.
Right. That's incredible. And do you find that you have enough volunteers or no? Okay. And are there certain areas where you need more volunteers? Like if someone's listening and is interested, I mean, obviously it's nationwide, but do you see whether do you see anywhere that it
If
has
you
a higher
live in
need?
a town and you know that there's a military base and you have the ability to welcome a pet into your home for a week, couple of weeks, a few months, even a year, even longer, then I would love to invite you to join Dogs in Employment. I consider my boarders a reserve force. I don't want to use any of them. I don't want a service member to have to use us. I want to be out of business because I want everybody that owns a pet to always have a plan for their pet. That's not reality. So I have always this constant fear of what if we had a mass deployment out of XYZ military base? Do I have enough people in that area to ensure that every single service member that I know I'll get apply will find a good, not just a home, but somebody that's truly compatible with their pet? Because I can't tell you how difficult it is when a quick deployment happens. We don't have a lot of options for our pet owners. And what ends up happening is you have these boarders that out of the best intentions of their heart, they'll say, you know what? Yes, I'm going to help you, even though I know your dog is too high energy for my household. And then you have problems. And then we have to address that mid-deployment and it becomes a huge issue. So it's not just that I need a 1-for-1. I need 10 boarders for each service member so that they have an opportunity to choose the right home for them. And it's not a hit on you if you don't get chosen, right? But I don't want a boarder to have to feel chosen because there's no other options.
Yeah. And what would you say to someone who's like, oh, okay, you have a pet. Why don't you just ask your mom to take it? Or why can't you just ask, a sibling or a neighbor to take it?
Truly, to ask for somebody to watch an animal for 6 months or more is not feasible for so many families, especially when you consider that military members are not usually located in their hometowns. I was from San Jose. I lived in San Diego.
Yeah, it's not close.
That isn't close. And my parents actually lived in Maui, so there was no way that I was going to be able to get my dog to the island just for a 6-month period of time. So it is a matter of the geographic lifestyle of being in the service doesn't really permit that always being an option, as well as just knowing that the realistic thing is that many of our service members come from low-income families. And there's a lot of reasons why people join the service, and it's not always indicative of
Sure.
having a good family relationship.
Yeah. And again, I think the location piece is something that people may not think about.
Totally.
It's
That
my
is the main piece.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Maryland and my brother was stationed in Pensacola and then Norman, Oklahoma, and he was in Turkey for a while. So it's not like we could have just bebopped around and if
Mhm.
he had a pet, like picked it up. So,
Right. And pet transportation can be very stressful on animals and also
yeah.
very expensive.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the mascot? Is this something that you do every
Every
year
year.
or
Yes.
okay, and then
So we'll
how
be
is your mascot?
soliciting applications for our next mascot starting in about November timeframe. And
Fun.
then people can come to our website and follow us on social media in January, where we'll be voting. And if anybody out there listening wants to support the organization, we do work with prize sponsors. So if you're interested in either donating to the prize contest through in-kind donations or product support, happy to discuss that.
That's great. And then I think I know the answer to this as someone who has a background in fundraising, but what does Dogs on Deployment need most? Like if I can't board a pet, is it cash donation? Is it in-kind donation? Like what are you seeking most of right now, or is that highest need?
The highest need is, and I hate to say this, but it really is money. The
Mhm.
reason being is this organization really streamlined itself in terms of our operational cost. However, through the pandemic, what we saw was a big pullback of revenue that we relied on, mostly from corporations. And so there's a big deficit where our individual donors, we love them. Like, thank you. Like, if you're out there donating $25 like a month, like it really does sustain us because we have so many people involved with it. However, what we used to do with our funding is basically I know how much it costs for me to run this organization and ensure we have our Hero Pet Boarding Network. The Hero Pet Boarding Network is our website. It is the core of our program. We need an operational website, and I'll get to that in a moment. But after that has been accounted for, anything we have overage, we assign to what's called our Rich Setzer Memorial Fund, which is a program named in honor of a late volunteer, Rich Setzer, who was a Navy veteran who tragically passed away in 2020 after contracting COVID. And we have this fund where we provide veterinary assistance for veterans and military in case their dog has emergency surgery, gets hit by a car, chemotherapy, etc. We have a spay neuter program because the Hero Pet Boarding Network requires all pets to be spayed or neutered within our program. We offer financial assistance for that, as well as pet PCSing. So as I mentioned earlier, moving pets can be very expensive. Well, service members, when they go overseas, Up until January 1st, 2024, I believe, they were 100% financially responsible for shipping their pet. Now, those costs have gone up astronomically due to COVID, due to CDC recent changes and guidelines, due to airline restrictions. There's all these reasons, literally within the past 4 or 5 years. A pet that we used to give a grant to cover a total cost of $2,000, say, to take a dog from San Diego to Hawaii, now might cost $7,000.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not like,
Yeah.
it is just so much more expensive. Last year alone, we received over almost $1 million in requests of aid just for PCSing. We can't afford
Wow.
that. We don't have that revenue come in because we have our Hero Pet boarding network as well. Now that is a problem in and of itself. If anybody here is listening and they come from a tech background, this is really where I kind of thrive in the organization's perspective, having an engineering mindset, and did a lot of work as a product owner within Dogs in Deployment, building this application that allows the easy and seamless connection between active duty service members getting verified, which is a whole process in and of itself that requires security, it requires two-way feedback, it requires authentication. And it also has security risks that come with that, right? We are verifying deployments, which we don't want that information to be widely accessible, right?
Right.
So we have this, responsibility to ensure we have an effective application that handles our service members, as well as ensuring that our boarders can easily get in, that they have resources available to them, that they're able to connect and communicate effectively, that when the pet owner does choose a boarder, that they're able to assign that boarder to their pet so that the boarder can then receive all of that pet owner's care plan. There's a whole feature list behind this. Well, this website was last launched in 2018. And when did you get your last phone? Right? Like
Right.
2018 was now 6 years ago. And our website is having problems with mobility compatibility, and most of our users are on mobile phones. We're having issues with just code getting outdated, our database, and things are becoming more expensive and less efficient. So I have a plan in place, and I have a team on the ready to basically launch our new program's website and our application, but I can't do that until I've secured that funding.
The
And
funding.
so that's really where we're working on building more relationships with our donors, our sponsors, partners. We have a great partnership. If you need dog treats, go to our website, or Lazy Dog Cookie Company. Look up Operation Drool Overload. It's a treat that supports our organization's revenue. So we're really looking at how can we diversify our revenue portfolio in order to ensure that we have sustainability, not just for our day-to-day operations, but to advance our Hero Pet boarding network and make it better, more secure, more reliable. That way, military members can get approved and access to boarders faster, and we can retain and recruit more boarders in our network because it's easier to use, as well as get a much bigger kickstart on reinvigorating our Rich Setzer Memorial Fund and making sure that we don't have to either deny applications or close the programs, which we have temporarily suspended those programs for unsolicited applications.
Yeah. I don't think people generally understand how much things cost. I mean, $1 million in requests last year alone
Insane.
is huge.
Right.
Again, I think people just
Right.
pick up their phones and there's an app and they use it and it's free and like, great.
Yeah, you do not think how expensive it is
Yeah.
to do that, especially when there's, pressure to have everything be US based and all this stuff. And it's like, well, that's all fantastic, but like I'm go to rover.com. Please do, and then tell them to come work with Dogs in Deployment. Go to care.com and think
Yeah.
about how complicated those websites are as you use them. Dogs in Deployment's no different.
Right.
We're really no different, but we're operating with a budget like this big.
Right.
And those companies are able to work on revenue generating models. So, even if I had a team of volunteer programmers, which I couldn't, there's still a monetary cost associated with having a website. You have
Right.
to have hosting, you have to have cloud, you have to have security. And so there's no perfect solution, but right now what the organization has done is I've brought on tech advisors. I've been working with a reliable team for the last, 8 years. And I have a product map in place, but for those out there that maybe come from the tech community and understand my challenge here, I do seek advisement. I do seek partnership. I do seek the ability to say, hey, this isn't just a challenge for me. Like I'm having a tech issue that's preventing me from having an effective program, but it's a problem that affects all nonprofits because
Yeah.
all of us have a tech requirement and an online presence.
You have an engineering background. You also were a pilot. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, I was a C-130 pilot.
Very cool. And then you obviously are doing this as well, and you recently transitioned out of the military.
Yeah.
How has that transition been?
Most challenging thing of my life, honestly, leaving the service as a pilot and just assuming that's what I was going to go do felt like a real lack of options. And it felt very like directed. And when the pandemic hit in April 1st of all days, April 1st, 2020, I got an email from the airline that I was going to go fly for, that my training had been canceled indefinitely. And at the time, I had just combined households with my family. We're a multi-generational household, and my parents had some medical issues that required us to bring them into our care. And I had my two kids that were home with me, and I had this nonprofit that was in more need than ever. And there was just this whole loss of identity at all that time. And I
Mhm.
didn't know how to do any one of those things right. And so the transition has really been less about transitioning out of the military because I also joined when I was 17. Like I was 17 years old and I walked into a recruiter's office and they made me do pull-ups when I walked through the door. And at the time I could do 20 pull-ups and they were gung-ho about me and
Yeah,
I was eating it up. And
sure.
so for me, the transition has been less about transitioning from the military into civilian life, but more just transitioning to who is Alisa Sieber.
Hmm. Yeah. I think there is such identity with what we do
Too much so.
oftentimes. Yeah,
Too
I
much
mean,
so.
I definitely experienced that. And I had a job loss a few years ago, and I was like, now what? Like what, And so I can only imagine, you know, going into the military as an option and going into the military as an option that was going to open up worlds for you.
Totally.
Um, and then to transition out of that, it's like, now what? And doing this is incredible work, but you were also dealing with other things going on and, just the global pandemic in general. That was not
Whatever.
a
It was a
super,
pretty crazy year.
super fun
We
time.
all had our challenges, and I don't think it was all full of tragedy and heartbreak.
Yeah.
We all have to just live with that. And I think what is the beautiful part of being on the back side of that is the amount of doors that opened to like the awareness piece and the healing piece and the conversations just feel different.
Hmm.
And you know, I find myself so lucky that one, I was also able to use my other veteran benefit being the GI Bill.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, I had a hard time in the military, but I fully appreciate my military service and I
Sure.
truly do recommend it as an option for anybody that's young and seeking, you know, structure and a future and a path forward in today's very uncertain environment. But I was able to use my GI Bill to go back to school, and I went back to um, my undergrad school, University of San Diego, and I was able to get my MBA. And I'm now working on my master's in leadership and nonprofit. which I don't know why I didn't do the nonprofit one first. But like I said, I didn't think I was going to be doing this full
Yeah.
time that I am. I just kind of always assumed dogs in employment would be able to be this side hustle that like I had done for years as a military, and then I realized like that's not fair. It's not possible. And I have the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
But that education piece was really eye-opening in the way of giving me something to focus on that still had structure, still having that learning opportunity through really difficult times and being aware to my, I don't know, my luck, my privilege, my of all the bad things that happened, like I walked out, pretty unscathed. And I just hope that my organization or the work that I do in my life, whether it's through Dogs in Employment or my other charity work that I do, or my art or anything else, that I'm able to share the message that even in like when you think you're going to lose it all, there's a reason why you might still feel that pull to complete whatever it is that you're doing. And I feel like I'm at the completion of that journey and starting a new one. And really want people to be able to be inspired by that because it wasn't easy. No.
That's really beautiful. And you can absolutely not answer this question, but who would you say you are now?
Well, I am a stay-at-home mom now. You know, I I've taken my kids' education in my own hands. I've been able to heal the identity with being a mother, which was really difficult through the pandemic because I felt like that was my biggest failure of everything that I had on my plate. So I'm proud to say that now as like that first thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I think at my core, I'm a giver. I loved that book as a kid. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know how not to give myself to others. And as cliche as that might seem, or I do say it with like the truest sincerity that I don't know another way of being other than always ensuring that my drive is going forth to make this world a better place for my daughters. And that every action that I do, whether it's a good action or a really questionable action, that I walk away from that with a lesson that I can use to improve myself or improve my relationships with people or, showcase to my children what it is to be somebody that struggles with a million things, but still goes to find a solution.
That's so well encapsulated. And it's interesting because you say you're a giver and a natural giver. And I mean, I can feel it in this conversation, how passionate you
Yeah.
are about it. If there's one thing that you hope that someone who is listening to this today walks away with from Dogs on Deployment, what would that be?
The power that you have.
Mhm.
We walk about our days, I feel like, forgetting that we're people in a network of other human beings. And it really is that interaction piece beyond a comment, beyond a share. Like what always gets me with the organization is the moment that a boarder, a volunteer will come to us and say, like, I never had any connection to a service member before. And suddenly now I'm so intimately involved with this person's life, the well-being of their most important thing, like their pet. And there's not another organization that allows you to have that level of impact, in my opinion, on both a person and on an animal, because they come together as a package. It's an animal organization, but it's really a human organization too.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything that we didn't talk about anything that I missed or anything that you want to share?
You asked earlier, who am I
Uh-huh.
now? And I think I should end that on I am who I have always been, and that was a writer.
Hmm.
And that is where my future has a lot of space for me. And I'm ensuring that I am putting time into not only my organization, but also doing what I've always wanted to do, which was to write a book about my life. And it was a book I started when I was 13 years old. And I found through the pandemic that story was so relatable to me as an adult. And I've started to rewrite it. And I hope to have it published by next year. That would be my goal. And so I just, if my story resonates with you, or if you want to connect with me in any way, I have an open door to humanity.
That's wonderful. I love how open you are to the world and to discovering what's next, right? Like just seeing what happens and taking that next step. So, three questions that I ask everyone.
Okay.
Um, what do you love most about the work that you're doing? And I think we touched on this a little bit, but what makes you get up every day and do this work? What do you love most about it?
It's tangible change.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm doing something every single day. And whether that is because I'm putting a new article on our blog for somebody to read, which we do have a great blog,
Nice.
or it's me finishing a chapter of my writing, or it's me doing something with my children that teaches them a lesson. You did ask me, I know that you had mentioned earlier something about a cat, right?
Yes, my
That you
cat
fostered
Daisy.
earlier.
Yes.
Um, last year, my daughter wanted a kitten for her 7th birthday, and I said, okay, that's fine, but if we're going to get a kitten, we're going to foster a litter of kittens, and you and your sister are going to help take care of these animals, and then you're going to adopt 4 of them out, and you can each keep a kitten.
Mhm.
Okay. This was a wild idea, but that to me was the epitome of what I love doing. Because what I was doing was I was doing something that I love to do, that I already do, which is my work, animal rescue, right? And
Yeah.
fostering cats for an organization that I have always supported and love them. And then I'm teaching my children also like the importance of fostering, animal relinquishment problems, shelter problems, what happens to animals, the importance of spay neuter, why we need to vaccinate our cats, like feeding schedules, like all of these lessons, introducing them to new people, right? And then
Mhm.
that part of even adopting them. Like my kids were helping me do their marketing, like videos and stuff, and we got them all adopted. But like that moment of them having to say goodbye to the kittens that they raised was heartbreakingly beautiful,
Mhm.
because what they are carrying with them now for the rest of their lives is like what I love.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought for a minute you were going to say, and we ended up with 6 cats.
No way.
That would have been me. I we were talking earlier and I foster failed this little kitten and she was found in the middle of the road near horse farm. She was half a pound and I was like, sure, I'll watch her. And everyone was like, you're
You're
not
gonna
getting
do
rid of
it.
this cat. And I was like, I know. Like, but I have an older cat and I wanted to make sure he was okay with it. And
Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, I'd end up with like 26 cats and dogs, and it is a skill set to foster, to adopt to someone else, and
It is,
it's a
because you have to
beautiful
have a
thing.
detachment there.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say in warning to, or I guess I should say in to help people that might be fearful of that with dogs on employment, there's a difference there. Because with
Mhm.
animal rescue, that pet doesn't have a home. And so naturally you
Yes.
have this kind of like feeling of like, I could give this pet the best home.
Yes.
But with dogs on employment, that animal does have a home. And you know that that owner loves their dog or their cat. So
Yes.
it's a very different relationship that you enter into,
Yes. And
which
to
also
be,
helps with kids. I always tell families, like, you don't want to adopt a dog, but your kids are bugging you for a dog.
yeah.
Come to Dogs on Employment.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great idea. And that's such a beautiful thing to care for that pet who like, yeah, they're happy with you, but oh my gosh, they're gonna go back home. I mean, that's a really special that's special to be a part of someone's life in that way, both the human's life and the animal's life. Um, and this, again, you can kind of answer in whatever way feels right for you. But what advice would you give either to your younger self or to listeners who are hearing you and are like, wow, you've had this amazing journey in your life and it's certainly not over. What advice would you give?
There's a voice in your head that is going to tell you to worry about what people think, that is going to tell you to worry about if you can actually do this or how you're going to do this. And that anxiety is real, and nobody can really truly understand your own anxiety. And that's hard. It's a really hard thing to feel like you're almost living alone in that. And so I think that my advice would be, if you feel that and you have an idea or you want to like move forward with something, let your inner passion or your inner you be louder than that. No, you're going to have to fight that anxiety constantly. It will never go away, for me at least. If you figured out how to get rid of it, please be on this podcast and I'll listen to it. But, every day I question like who I am in the world and what are people going to think of me, and what if they knew XYZ? Would they not support the organization? You know what? I don't care anymore. Like, and I think that is such a release that I hope other people can get to, because I feel like a lot of that anxiety comes from our own shame and our own insecurities of like why we're doing the things we're doing. I know when I look back onto my younger self, most of my anxiety around dogs employment came from my leadership really being negative about what I was doing and not understanding like how much it was fulfilling me and how much it meant to me. If I would have listened to those people and allowed it to kill that spark within me, then I wouldn't be sitting here. And I'm pretty happy here. I've never really truly been happy before, until this journey feels like it's come to that closure. So just listen to your heart.
Yes, yes. That's a beautiful
I'm like,
place
how
to
can I make
be.
this more cliche?
No, not at all. I mean, there's a reason why we hear the cliches, right? Like every time I hear, and we all have these voices in our head, and I need to have someone who can help us deal with anxiety on, and also a neuroscientist, because
Right,
where is that voice coming from? Like,
right.
but I will literally talk back to it and be like, stop. Like, we don't have time for this, right? And if you had listened to that voice in your head, think about all the people that wouldn't have been served, you know? And so
Right.
I'm so glad that you kept moving on and persevering and didn't listen to it. And we will have all your information on the website. And I can't wait to read your book. I'm really actually very excited to read it.
Thank you.
How can people find you?
Well, Dogs Unemployment is on dogsunemployment.org. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Just Google us. Pretty easy. I'm writing by Alisa on Instagram if you're interested in connecting with me personally, or I'm also on LinkedIn. I love talking with people about literally anything. I'm an introvert extrovert, right? So like I love one-on-ones.
That's great. What's your zodiac sign? I'm curious.
Capricorn.
Capricorn. See, that makes sense. It makes total sense. You're like
Mhm.
driven, introvert, extrovert. I love it.
Yeah, it's weird. I always look at those things and I'm like, I don't want to admit it, but that's totally me.
I have just fully embraced it. I'm like, yeah, it is what it is. And I'm just curious, like, is your book, how is it written? Are you doing like a straightforward biography or poetry or
Oh no,
your style?
I'm way too complicated for a straightforward biography. It's a saga that's an
Mhm.
interwoven piece between a present day first person main character who goes through a lot of internalization struggles. And so it's focused on key events through her life, but all of those key events that happen in the present are also pulling her back to a place of her past. And her past story actually follows that of her mother. and her childhood. And so it's told from this dual perspective of this first person main character in the present, as well as this third person in the past mother character, and their timeline going forward until the main character then discovers her journals. And then we pick up with her journals in her middle school years.
Wow, that is really creative. Kudos to you. I can't wait to read it, and now I'm
It has
more
been
excited to read
so
it.
incredibly complicated and a
Yeah,
long project, and it's been in my head, and I'm finally at the point where I'm like, all right, I'm getting chapters to my publisher.
you're
Like,
doing it. Yes, you're doing
yeah,
it.
I'm finally there.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a labor of love. Well, thank you so much for being on today and for sharing your journey and for what you're doing. And we will have all your information on the website so people can get involved.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
All right. Take care. Bye. Thanks for listening to Wait, What Do You Do Again? For more information about today's guest, or if you'd like to be on the show, please visit megdeford.com. See you next time.